Hello all, thank you for coming. This is the 15-3 team planning for essentially discussing UX issues. I'd like to start off by going over a couple discussion points. The first one is regarding UX roadmaps. I believe everyone on this call has at least gone through the process and hopefully finished their roadmaps. We should start using them. For this, at least for this planning, I figure if you have them, it makes sense. The one thing that I wanted to point out that may not have been clear is that the essence of thematic road mapping is that we would pick a theme and then work on that theme. We wouldn't jump around to other themes and things like that. But we would also have to take into account any other non-theme things that may have popped up, and we'd have to plan for those. So right now, the tables that we have inside of our issue are more issue related as opposed to thematic. And Andy is testing out a different version of that. So if you were to look at the current issue, you'll see that there's that top table. Where's the sharing button? You know, they make the sharing button green, but I always miss it. So Andy is trying something new in order to help sort of explain what I'm saying. So generally you work on a single theme and it might have several issues within it, but you're going to work on that entire umbrella of the theme itself. And then if there's any non-theme related things, it would go in this bugs or text things, I don't know, smallish things that may not be thematic that you just need to work on in order to get them through. Because I don't know where everyone's at with their roadmaps, I didn't convert everyone's over to that, but it might be something to consider. Does that make sense? Andy, do you have anything to add to that for clarification?
No, that's a great summary.
Cool. Any questions on that? Because we didn't stress it too much when we were doing the roadmaps, but now that everyone's done, we need to start figuring it out.
Can you scroll back up? So we just put the link to the theme and don't list out the individual issues. Is that the idea? Unless an issue is not related to that theme.
Right.
Okay.
So, and the reason for that is because part of the reason that we wanted to do roadmaps, aside from trying to make it a little more clear to everyone else what we're working on, what everyone's working on, is that we should be working at a higher level as opposed to individual issue slices of a feature. So we would think about the whole thing a little bit more holistically. Now, the tricky part is how does that then trickle down into the individual issues that we have? So there's going to be some trial and error as we work through that component. But ultimately, you should be designing the whole thing as opposed to just bits of it. Right. So if you define your theme to be a whole topic, they're all related, everything's related within that theme, it would make sense to design the big thing together.
I guess what I'm thinking through right now is there's estimated weight remaining. That's not necessarily indicative of how much weight is going into that milestone. So there's just like,
yeah,
is there seem to be a column saying like how much weight is in that theme? So we would just have to kind of do that math when we carry it up to the top, where we have that box that says like our, our availability or what our weight is.
Yeah, estimated weight remaining versus current weight to be expended, I guess.
Yeah.
Andy, what are your thoughts on that? What would you think?
Just estimated milestone weight. So for each milestone, so estimating 7 points to this milestone. Next milestone, it could be 4 or 10, and then milestone after that, hopefully to wrap it up, 2 or 3. So you're just calculating at the current milestone level, because that's all we need to reflect at the top of the issue is what's our capacity. So how much?
So this isn't remaining.
Spending. Correct. Yeah. So if you refresh then I just changed it to
Okay.
estimated milestone.
Perfect. So instead,
Cool.
it's just the
That
weight
makes
that you're
sense.
going to spend working on it for this milestone. Okay. It would be interesting to know how much is left, but we could figure that out later. In general, I just want to make sure that everyone is clear on the concept and the purpose. And if you have any questions, let's talk through it now.
So
For the-
one thing that I'm thinking about is we may say we work on one theme for one milestone and we get a specific feature done within that theme, but then we have another feature that's within a different theme that is the next highest priority because that's what customers are asking for. Is it okay? I mean, we're going to have to jump around between the themes, between different milestones, rather than working on a single theme until it's finished. Because once we get past the first couple of things within that theme may now be less or lower priority than a different theme because we work through the top items within that theme. Does that make sense?
Are you thinking in terms of development or in terms of design?
In terms of design. So because I have to get things to the development team, as Michael works through them. So let's take the pre-scan verification that we just finished off. So that was highest priority, incredibly important to do. Michael's finished that. That may make that theme now much lower priority in terms of what I need Michael to work on next, because that was the only high priority item within that theme. So he'd move on to a different theme because we're moving on to a different feature that is now high priority.
Yeah,
We'd
that's
probably
interesting.
consider that theme to be closed, right, and done. As if you're not going to touch it again for a year, or if it's not part of like the near end phase to progress category maturity, then you can move on to the next thing that's your next priority.
But what happens to that thing? Do
Okay.
you really close it even though it's not done? Or do you just move it to, I mean, we don't want these things to be backlogged.
No, but if the scope of the theme isn't reflective of the goals of the year, meaning there's more in the theme to be done that are maybe nice to haves or, you know, really realistically aren't going to happen this year, then you don't really want to be designing those, right? So you can close that theme and prepare it for next year's roadmap, or, you know, just keep an eye on it. That's kind of
Sure. The thing that I'm thinking though is that, so I could have, from a product perspective, talking to customers, I could have one feature that is the highest priority right now for us to get designed and get over to engineering that's in one theme. I could have the second priority in a different theme because that's just what customers are asking for. And then the third priority could be back in the same first theme.
Yeah.
Because for product perspective, I'm not prioritizing to themes, I'm prioritizing to what customers need.
Yeah, so that's actually where the handoff comes in. So when the designer's working on the theme, you're going to just design to the extent that that theme requires. So all those, you know, sub themes are considerations or requirements of that theme. That's all going to be designed and delivered. It's up to your team to say, how do we break this down? Oh, this one feature is highest priority. Let's break that down. The theme's not closed, but it's done from a design perspective. So now those designs are just going to wait until they go through their next phases of planning breakdown. Meanwhile, as Michael had finished that theme, he can move on to the other theme that houses your P2 feature, design the extents of that, and your team now has a design ready backlog to work through while Michael's working ahead.
Okay.
Is that, are you saying that he would have designed the entire theme one, even though they only needed the first priority?
Yes.
So that's still saying what I was initially getting at, but I think that Derek is saying I don't want him to spend, because let's say to do that, the whole theme takes 2 milestones. Derek is saying he'd rather him do as much as he can on that theme in milestone 1. Hopefully he'll complete the first top priority issue. If he doesn't get to anything else, so be it. Now in milestone 2, he needs to move on to the other theme. I mean, it's not, I guess nothing's ever going to be black and white, right? It's never going to be design the entire theme. That's what we want. That's the intent. But if it's not possible, then, so be it, as long as you're keeping in mind the overall concept of what we're shooting for.
We want to avoid designing discrete singular features and just plugging them in, because after 6 months we look back and go like, oh shit, it's like looks like pop art, right? Like, how did these Picasso pieces get to where they were? They were all in the right spots, but now the nose is on the ear. So we want to avoid that. So we just want designers to focus on an area for a given amount of time, probably longer than 1 milestone. This is going to build up a backlog to pull from. But if priorities shift, then priorities shift. But we just want to keep in mind design churn, how much time we're spending on the research and design aspect of the entire topic.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess we'll just work through it, and if anything comes up, then we'll deal with it as it comes up.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the first time we're trying to processize this, so it's all flexible.
Sure. Yeah. Cool.
We're also trying to get away from, we're noticing pitfalls with this MVC model, because we're ending up with sort of this weird amalgam once we get to the end, if we ever do even get to the end of creating a fully fleshed out feature. So we're hoping that if we design the whole thing and then we break it down in an MVC version in a development area, that should help create a more complete picture when we get to the end. But like Andy said, and like you said, Derek, we're going to play it by ear. And I think eventually, once we start to get more accustomed to this concept, right now we have a lot of our old features and the old mindset. Once we work through them and we can get into anything new, we'll be able to adapt to this thematic concept, and it won't be so sort of mismatched. Any other questions?
Yeah, so on the non-theme related needs, what level of fidelity do we want going into this? And is this supposed to be something we just kind of best guess at the outset, or do we want to keep updating? So for example, like if there's a bug that pops up at the beginning of the milestone, we've already started, do we want to slap that on here because it needs UX?
So I mean, you mentioned a couple of things. If it's a bug and we know about it now, 2 weeks before the milestone, we should definitely put it on here. If it's something that pops up unplanned, but it's really high priority, it's a nasty bug, people are freaking out kind of thing, then yeah, I mean, we have to do what we have to do. It has to supersede something else.
I guess my question is this a planner or a tracker, or is it both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, hopefully that wouldn't happen. Hopefully we'll have planned it, nothing changes while we work on it, so then it's a planner. But if something,
how long have you worked here, Justin?
I don't know. But yeah, so that's the point, right? It is a planner, ultimately.
Okay. I'm just kind of like thinking through it. Becca probably has a better sense of this, but I feel like we do have lots of things where we'll get in there, we know about the bug, or even maybe something that they think is back end work. Mid milestone, the engineers will go, that's not going to work. We're going to have to change XYZ, and we'll need some sort of UX treatment to work around it. So that's the kind of what I'm getting at, is do we need to try to retroactively add things here? Because I mean, it's probably okay, but that's just going to be something we'll have to keep in mind.
I would like to, but I don't think it's a huge burden if you don't. But what will likely happen is that work will have pushed something else down and you might not get to it now. So that's why we have the column carryover notes, like why didn't you get to it? You could then say, oh, well, bug XYZ popped up, I had to take care of it. Didn't give me time to do this.
Okay,
It'd be nice
I
if
actually
that
kind of
bug
like
was,
that too.
was there, but it's fine if it's not.
Okay, I actually kind of like that too, so that we're not having to continually maintain this as an ongoing sort of retroactive status for things. And
Yeah,
hopefully
I
that's the
don't
exception,
want
not the
this to
rule.
be overly burdensome, but I do want to, we should be able to look at this when it's done. And if everything carried over, like nothing got finished technically, like, well, why did that happen? We should be able to answer that.
Makes sense.
Cool. The next thing I wanted to mention is sus impacting issues. A lot of discussion around severities and if it's, how does that relate to when we need to put this onto the schedule and things like that. I just wanted to say that sometimes we're getting issues that we didn't create, someone else created them, and then they're handed to us and they gave a severity label. The first thing we should do is look at those and evaluate them ourselves and talk amongst ourselves to figure out what it means, of course, and then is it really whatever severity they gave it? And then we can make the determination after that in terms of when we can prioritize it based on the severity number. But we're totally within our power to change the severity if we disagree with what was there. I am working on an MR that may or may not get through to request that anyone that puts a severity label on there to give a comment explaining why they gave that severity. I saw a comment from Valerie that I haven't read completely yet, but it looked like she had a couple question marks. So anyway, so that's about that. Otherwise, if it's a high enough severity, we should be trying to figure out how to put it on there if it's a UX one anyway. Any questions on that? Spending all our time talking about announcement type things. All right. Let us actually move on to the point of this meeting. Looking at the first thing, Andy, check to see if there are any sus related issues.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't think we do actually. Yeah, we don't have any S1s, we don't have any S2s for sus across any groups right now. Okay, composition analysis, Andy, take it away.
The theme we'll be starting on is the ensuring security teams can audit and triage their software components for risks to maintain compliance. This will be just, a broad effort to look at improvements for the dependency list page. Take into account the work that Sam White has planned for his the SCA team to be working on, and just diving in, seeing what can be changed and how we can kind of strategically reposition that page to meet users' needs in the SBOM space as well.
Okay, Sam, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how we can associate these themes with the issues that are in them, because otherwise we're like kind of going back and forth between the mural doc and like trying to correlate all of these. So maybe we can just mark them as related issues might be the best. I don't know. Unless you have another idea.
Oh, that's what we should be doing. Linking them or marking them as related, or referencing them in the theme issue description, whatever doesn't break organization patterns that we have for issues and epics. So if you have any, just you can throw them in the theme issue in the description where there's a table,
Okay.
or you could just point me to a list you have, and I can do all that work.
I'll just use if it works, I'll just use the feature in GitLab to mark issues as related to each other, and I'll just mark them all as related to this one. So then you'll get a list. Does that work?
That's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. And then for container security, we're really looking forward to having Camellia back. It would be great for her to, in addition to just a bunch of like odds and ends that have come up while she's been out. It would be great for her to work on the theme of reducing container scanning noise. We have a collection of items related to the security policy editor specifically that are coming up on our backlog, and it'd be great for her to work through those designs.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to get her up and running on this whole UX roadmap stuff too. But that works. DAS, Michael?
Yeah, so Derek and I still have to touch base on the specifics of what we'll be doing, but I think we'll just be continuing on with the theme of increasing adoption by making DAST more approachable. There's a couple different sub themes within there that we'll probably have to discuss the priority of, but I know like the profile redesign has been on the backlog for a little while, so it'll be nice to pick that one up this milestone. And then beyond that too, then there's also a research issue that has been kind of on the back burner for a while too, around how do DevOps teams want to configure their security tools. So I'll probably spend some time on both the groups, DAST and SAS, kind of dedicate a little bit of time to finishing that up.
Okay.
And then on the SAS side of things, so we've already kind of been working on the theme of having code quality findings more in line. I guess the theme itself is relating security and quality findings within their context. So it'll probably be a little bit of work continuing on getting the static analysis side sort of prepped for the inline findings. But then after that, we're looking at a theme of showing inline findings within the source code view as well.
Okay. Orderly management.
Pass. Beck and I were both out all last week. I think we're both still catching up.
She updated the table.
Yeah,
then.
I just added stuff. So for 15.2, I mean, it's carryover, basically. It's going to be carryover from 15.1 and 2, because auto resolve vulnerabilities policy it's a lot bigger than anticipated. So that took up a chunk of time, and then I need to revisit filters and groups. So I linked to that theme there that has like filters, grouping, custom saved views. That's the second item. But then there's a one-off of canceled vulnerabilities detected in a pipeline or revert or whatever the word is that we want to use there. So that will be the other thing that I'm looking at.
Okay.
I think. Does that sound right, Matt? I don't know if I know it's been like whack-a-mole. Like there's been so many to-dos that have popped up on this, that, and the other. And we're trying to like fit things into themes. They don't always have themes. So, it's a little bit weird because it's like, how do we keep track of this? I guess we can just slap a milestone on it, even if it doesn't fit into a theme, and then use boards to, track what we had slated for that milestone.
Is this not in the theme because it was already being worked on prior to road mapping, so it didn't have a home, or it was left out of the process? Or is it literally just not a theme thing, it's just something that needs to get done?
I think we've done a pretty good job of putting things into themes. I feel like there's been one or two things that were like, it's not really a theme, but or maybe it's a theme that we're supposed to work on in like, a next theme, but there's one issue. This is an issue that we'd want to work on before the next theme that's slated. I mean, it's kind of like what Sam was saying, like things don't always just perfectly fit into like working on every issue in order in a theme, and then you move on to the next theme. It's just a little bit more scattered than that sometimes. So
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
just to add to that, Justin, I think Thread Insights has probably, with maybe the exception of Sam's area, the broadest UI footprint. So we just have lots of little, very tactical one-off things that are either needed as a result of some the refactor work that we've been doing, like that item number 1 here. That's a very specific need that our own AppSec team has highlighted, as well as a number of customers. It's not really attached to anything else. I think we're just kind of going with it's better to just deal with them independently because they seem like an isolated feature than try to shoehorn it retroactively into a
Yeah.
theme, which to Derek's point, may not align with when we actually need it. Right, because I think I'm comfortable with the way that we've got the theme sequenced out, but if something's in the future bucket, but we need the feature like within the next 6 months, we're just gonna pull it out.
Okay, I think that's fine. I mean, these aren't meant to be so restrictive that you can't actually do things that customers need. I just want to make sure that at least we're keeping an eye on the overall goal of this, and that we are. I'm not saying we're not. That's something that can very easily get forgotten as we go. So we should fight against pulling things out here and there as much as we can as we start to get into themes, because otherwise we start to lose the whole point of the UX roadmap. You know, not to
don't
Yeah,
worry, there's a
100%,
lots of
100%.
comments between Matt and I on issues where we're like, is it this theme? Is it this theme? I mean, we're constantly trying to put things into themes. So
Yeah, now that
Yeah,
we
I
have
think-
it, it's easier to look back at the themes and say, does this fit here if it's new? Some of the other stuff that has been kind of sitting out there, I think that's more of the cleanup. And there's other things that are emergent, right? Like we had a bug that turned into a front-end UX treatment, which we realized is going to roll over into one of the themes around search and filtering because of what was going to change in the UX as a direct result of this bug. So there's just, yeah, I don't think we're ever going to be that clean on Thread Insights. There's going to be a lot of emergent changes.
No worries. Andy, do you think that type of stuff would fit into this version of the table?
I mean, it could. I think if you're, struggling playing whack-a-mole, but, it's something that you want to do is jumping around, I think that's fine, but you're always going to be in that hole, right? And the context switching is just going to be a burden. So that's why, like, if you can fit things like themes and similar things into a theme and design it all at once, it kind of saves you from all of the context switching and doing research here, but then having to do solution validation there, and then validating half of the experience because it's just one feature versus just validating the whole thing and having more confidence. So I mean, we don't want to be too restrictive that we can't meet our customers' needs, but we also want to be more holistic, right? That's something that the product leadership was talking about and questioning why we are where we are today and how MVCs need to be rethought. So I mean, it's it's up to your team to decide how you want to work, but I think that working thematically and just designing the whole thing and delivering it and moving on to the next priority could help solve a lot of the problems we've been encountering for years.
I don't disagree. Although I think one thing that's kind of nagging at the back of my brain is, well, let's say that we finish one of the themes, we've done the design, we've moved on. 6 months later, we realize that there's a gap or there's a new need that would have gone to that theme. What do we do? Do we reference back to that and see if we can fit it in there? Do we just sort of, deal with it? Do we open up a new theme that's basically the same thing? I think that's kind of what we're struggling with, is it's very easy to see the large related pieces, but then some of these more kind of like polished tweak issues, it feels like forcing it into the theme. Doesn't mean that it doesn't still need the design, but this is again back to that ordering, right? Do we wait for the next big thing that it could attach to? Do we just handle it? Do we reference the theme? I guess what we're pointing out is that themes are awesome. Themes are also conceptual. The reality is it's it's messier. We just want to kind of call that out. We're all trying to go in this direction.
Yeah. Well, I think you're always going to have those one-offs, right? And that's okay to like prioritize up as long as it doesn't become, you know, a list of 10 things and then the theme is just one of them, but then there's 10 other random things to fix. But working thematically, you wouldn't be generating one-offs, right? You shouldn't see add an empty state as a singular issue for a designer to do anymore, because that would have been incorporated into the theme as building the workflow, right? So we'll be reducing UX debt and these polish issues, which really are just a byproduct of planning breakdown.
In other words, when you're
But-
looking at the whole theme, you might have 5 issues, but when you look at it as a entire piece of design, you'll realize that there are certain requirements that are missing, like an empty state. You didn't have a specific issue that said we need an empty state, but you know that when you're designing this, you're going to need an empty state. That's ultimately what he's getting at. But regarding things that are literally just missed, that's the way the world works in design. Sometimes you miss an edge case, or there's an error case that you weren't even aware of until you started working with engineering. After you've delivered your theme, right? So dev finally gets to building it, and then they say, hey, we missed this. Yes, you need to put that issue now, basically, in the priority. And I think that's where it would go onto this table. So you don't have to open up the theme again, put it back in there. I don't think we need to go that far. I think you just need to say, hey, we need to do this because it was missed or whatever. But we should be striving to work at the thematic level, because as soon as we start to not do that, I guess, and it'll all fall apart. Like we'll never get to the goal that we want, which is working at this high level, full-on design thing holistically. That's the fear. Like we've seen this with jobs to be done. You know, we came out with this whole process and everyone jumped through the hoops, and then everyone's like, well, no one's riding me to continue updating them and using them and putting them in all the right places, so that it's kind of falling apart. We don't want that to happen with programs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. No, absolutely. We're just,
But and
I don't-
also these discussions, these planning meetings, we can keep talking about these things too. You know, as they come up, you're like, hey, I found this thing. I'm not sure how it fits in. What do I do? Like we're always here. So you're never going to be alone. You know,
I don't think we're alone.
we'll figure it out. All right, we are overtime, so I'm a terrible GitLab person. I apologize for that. Please continue the conversation on the issues. Please update your tables to incorporate everything that we talked about. Don't forget to look at OKRs to make sure that we're covering them. We are at the end of the last month of the quarter. And with that, let us know if anything comes up, you know, ping us in the issue if you have questions and whatnot. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.
You too.